Good morning. I'd like to introduce our second project for electrical, kind of bouncing off of the previous project that we had done where we were wiring together a duplex outlet. Project number 2 involves a similar process with the pigtails and wire nuts, grounding. But in this case, we're going to be using two different appliances, and that's going to be our single pole, single switch, also known to some as a toggle switch, and then our lamp holder. Okay, this is the finished project here, just that way you kind of get a glimpse of it between boxes 1 and 2. Notice in box number 1, we have on our switch two hot wires, two hot terminals, okay? Differing from our outlet where we had a hot and a neutral on either side. In this case, with a toggle switch, you have power that goes into the switch, but think of it like a drawbridge. In order for it to go to the other side, the bridge must be lowered, okay? In this case, with the switch on, my current is able to go through the switch to the other side and relay to my lamp holder in order to turn on a light. And of course, this neutral wire going back, relaying over to my power source. So think of it this way. If you look at, and what confuses a lot of students is, well, how come there are no neutrals? It's not necessary to have a neutral wired to your switch because again, it's a drawbridge. You're allowing that current in order to travel, and in some scenarios, now granted it's not this way in this particular project where you have a third appliance, but let's say that you did. If you had an outlet that's all the way over at box number 3, you can be able to have a second hot wire hooked up to your power in, relay it all the way over to box number 3, and have that power go all the way over to your neutral without ever having any kind of deflect where there's a neutral terminal put to your switch. In this case, the switch, completely independent of any kind of neutral wiring. It is only wired to our hot wires, where you have one hot wire and a second hot wire here, okay? So no neutrals. You never wire a neutral to your hot terminals. It is strictly your hot wires. In this case, I'm using black wires. Another item I want to point out to you, just to eliminate any kind of confusion, I am using 12-3 cable. So if you see any red wire, I'm just laying that aside. That's for future projects. I'm just trying to make it as simple as possible for myself putting this together, and so that way I'm not having to switch out cable after cable. I'm just using the same 12-3 wire for additional projects. This will come into play once we start getting into project number 4. But for project number 2, I have a switch in box 1 and a light fixture in box 3. Additionally, along with these projects here, with these appliances here, I do not have a ground that is attached to the lamp holder. Ground is not provided. However, I am grounding this box just in case, if in any scenario, if you were to change up the appliances, I could have a ground wire here, and it's relaying that ground to the cable that's running power towards box number 2. But that appliance is not requiring any kind of ground, so I am not going to put any kind of ground wire to it. But I do have a ground wire attached to my switch. So how do we go about putting this together? Well, this is where our second board comes into play. So we'll set this Martha Stewart board aside. And how do we put it together? So I took apart the previous project here. I'm going to have my light switch, my lamp holder. And I always tell students just one project at a time, or one appliance at a time, and only focus on one single wire at a time. And I'm just going to start with, okay, well, let's start with the power that goes in. So I'm going to start with my hot wire, okay, my black wire. I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to put together one single terminal at a time. And I'm actually going to steal a terminal off of this switch here. So what I'm doing is I'm just screwing together a terminal onto this switch. So that way I am able to relay my power from one side to another. I'm going to go ahead and put together my hot wire onto my switch. So the power is going in. And again, keep in mind that as you're putting your wire onto your terminal, remember the direction that your pigtail, your little question mark on your wire, what direction it must face. And that direction is clockwise. Again, if I have a counter clockwise direction to my pigtail, that's going to push that wire out. I want to have that pigtail kind of guide in, so I'm going to have it pointed clockwise, so that way you'll notice it kind of curls into that terminal, so that way it's fastened into place. So I got one side. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to apply my second pigtail. Turn it that clockwise direction. I could always just pinch it a little bit closer together, a little bit tighter. And then fasten the place, and there I have my hots for one single box. Now, there is the process of relaying that power over to box number 2. And I'm using black wire, so I'm going to use the black wire on box number 2. We'll create my pigtail. I'm actually going to take off a little bit more. I don't have enough copper wire exposed here. So we'll just peel off a little bit more. Okay, again, I'm going to apply my clockwise direction. To my lamp holder. Okay, and there we have our hot wires applied. Now we have one side of our circuit being applied between our light switch and our lamp holder. Now we go ahead and we're going to relay our power that goes back. Again, you don't have that power, it just goes one direction and stays there. It has to be able to complete a circuit. You're completing a circle starting one direction and going all the way around. So there I have to apply my neutral, the white wire. So I'm going to peel off some coating for my neutral wire. Point this in a clockwise direction. Tighten down my terminal. And from here, I would have my neutrals being met up at box number 1. So again, yeah, keep in mind what wires that you're using. The white wire from box number 2 relaying over to my white wire in box number 1. I'll hook up these two neutral wires together in order to complete the circuit. And again, I had used this neutral wire as a pigtail in previous project number 1. So no worries, I just straighten out this copper wire here. Straighten it out, strip off some coating on my second neutral, and I'll go ahead and I'll tie these two together by a wire nut. Now, it's very important that I'm using a wire nut in any case. In any case, would I ever use something other than a wire nut? I would never want to use any kind of other application in order to splice two wires together. I wouldn't be able to just simply twist them together and wrap them in something like electrical tape. It's very important that I am putting together these wires by wire nut. One, it's able to complete a thorough connection between the two wires, and also it's too hazardous in order to splice two wires together and connect them by electrical tape. Unsafe. A safer way of being able to cover the copper portion of my wire and splice them together is by wire nut. And also another thing I want to point out when it comes to actually using these wire nuts, I'm not going to have any copper exposed underneath. There's no copper that is showing. I got to have this completely covered. Same thing goes for any kind of hot wire. All right, I got to have everything covered, so that way nothing's coming in contact with that bare copper wire. So everything's properly covered, everything's properly connected. I have a complete circuit between my my hots and my neutral. The last thing I would have to do is complete my grounds. So I have my power in already hooked up to the ground in the box. But I still need to be able to have a ground that goes between box 1 and box 2. So here is my bare copper wire, my ground, that's going from box number 1 through the cable over to box number 2. So I could just loosen this up. And then connect together my 3 grounds. And of course, I'm using the wire nuts that have the hole over the top, so that way my ground is able to come up. And then connect to the ground on my switch. And I can always just tighten this together a little bit more, make it a little bit closer gap on my ground. And then just tighten up my terminal. Okay, so cable and switch are properly grounded in box number 1. Now there's box number 2. Box number 2, I'm going to just simply have these two, the cable just grounded to the box in box number 2. Use another green wire nut. And there we have box numbers 1 and 2 properly grounded between these two appliances. Additionally, in project number 3, what we'll see is something similar in this process where we have the light switch and the lamp holder. We're going to flip-flop, but I'll still have the power going into box number 1. I have to relay that power over to box number 2. We'll see that in the next video with project number 3.